Welcome back to Cinema Flicks and Music Picks. I'm Davey, your host with the most, the beast with the least. The least we can do today is have a look at the 3 new Bootleg series releases from Mr. Neil Young. Not released anything in a few months, so 3 in one day is the least he could do. Very briefly, if anyone's wondering what's happened to Jimmy Stewart Month for the last couple of days, I decided that when it's quite obvious to make either a duo video or a triple video on a theme, that I'm going to combine them and do 3 reviews in one video. So there'll still be 31 movies, just not 31 videos, because I think I was asking a bit much of people to watch that many. I don't really expect that many people to watch Mr. Kruger's Christmas reviews. So yeah, I've done some reformatting of the schedule there to be kinder to you and to me. But on with the show. So a few people have been asking online, especially about 2 of these releases in particular. Do we need these? Because these are both from very early 71. This one is February the 1st, this one is January the 30th, so within 3 days of each other, or 2 days. And this one's from 74. Now obviously at this point we've had quite a few releases from this rough period, sorry, not this period, but this period. We've had Young Shakespeare came out a few months ago, last year. Carnegie Hall came out 1970 a few months ago. Sugar Mountains a bit earlier, but that came out, a good few years ago. The Cellar Door, so we've had quite a few early solo acoustic shows from Neil. Now, I'll give you the short answer. Do you need these? No, you never need anything. But as a Neil Young fan, would you want these? In short, yes, definitely. Yes, if you prefer Neil to be a little bit more mellow and a little bit more upbeat. And yes, for historical purposes, even though the sound is nowhere near as good as these 2. Okay, so that's your short version. As a Neil Young fan, yes to all 3. But for casuals, if you can only have one, go for this one from 70, or this one from 74 if you want rarities and things. Okay. So that's your short version. So you can tune out now if you don't want the way into the weeds, review. So what I did was I listened to the 3 albums. I ordered the vinyl and the CDs, and only the vinyl showed up from Greedy Hand. The CD showed up from Greedy Hands, Neil's store, which is a little bit annoying. But it's happening quite a lot recently with vinyl backdating, with the factories being closed down in Eastern Europe and things. Nonetheless, we shall crack on. So what I did was I listened to them all, and then I listened to the 2 ones from just a few days apart, track by track, because the set lists are almost the same. So I wanted to compare exactly track versus track and see what the differences are in mood and tone and whatnot, and see if it is indeed worth recommending. So, we'll come to that conclusion, but again, I've already kind of told you the answer. But here's the thought process. This is me showing my working. So we'll start with Royce Hull, which comes first. This was January the 30th, 1971. Neil, sorry buddy, but if you're going to do this kind of replica vinyl packing, then you need something to stop this happening. Like, I'm not putting any pressure on it, and the disc just falls right out. You need something to stop that happening, buddy. I mean, it's nice to have them not as too thin, but that's annoying. However, so the idea of this, it's Neil's Beat the Boots. So he takes the old bootleg covers and puts on the better quality audio that he has, and essentially begets the best quality that anybody's heard these shows, which have circulated but not in this kind of quality. So we start with On the Way Home in both shows. It's a good opener, kind of sets the tone for the evening as a solid acoustic track. On this you can hear Neil nice and high in the mix, and the guitars a little bit lower in the mix. So it's not quite as guitar heavy in the mix as certainly the other one, but we'll go into that more as we go along. Tell Me Why, again, the audience popped for that. It was the lead off track from After the Gold Rush, which at this point was about 7 or 8 months old, something like that. So let me check actually. So it's been out for about 5 months at this point. And the last time anybody would have seen Neil live would have been with Crosby, Stills, Nash and Young, on the tour that led to the Four-Way Street album, which would be released in about 4 months after this. So again, we're on Tell Me Why. So solid track, very good rendition. Again, you can hear the guitars much lower in the mix here, so I don't know if it's a result of the actual tapes or if it's a result of the building itself, because Neil refers to it as being quite a small place. So who knows. But it's followed by Old Man, with a fun spoken word introduction, and at that point there becomes quite an echo in the mix, where there's a lot of it's almost like reverb, but you can hear Neil's voice just for a split second almost echoing and repeating, and that lends itself quite nicely to a kind of ethereal feel. Old Man becomes quite haunting with it. He gives you the funny introduction about I bought a ranch and this old guy came with it, so I kept him on, and everybody laughs. So Neil's in a kind of upbeat mood for this one. He does Journey Through the Past next, which the echo again makes it sound massive, absolutely massive. He's battering the piano. It's really fun to hear him on that after the guitar. So the piano is not low in the mix like the guitar is, and it's not that the guitar is inaudible, it's just lower in the mix. And Neil Young's vocals are way out front, so you can hear that. Someone shouts out, "It's nice to be here," and Neil says, "Nice to be here," and someone shouts, "Nice to have you," really quietly. So there's a kind of warmth with the audience. Heart of Gold, decent applause for it, but again, Harvest wouldn't be out until the next year, so nobody would have known Heart of Gold here. And it's kind of funny because there's nothing to indicate that it would have been the massive hit, the hit that would define Neil's career for a lot of people, certainly the casual fans. So it's kind of funny that it's met with, it was pleasant enough, but there's nothing terribly exciting about it. A Man Needs a Maid, Neil introduces it as one of my weird songs, and says that people laughed at the start of the tour, so he had to go back and write the introductory verse and the closing verse to kind of make it darker and more what he intended. Makes you wonder why you would ever laugh at Man Needs a Maid. It's quite a dark song as it is. So yeah, you can hear a lot of the intensity in it, and this version here, just with Neil on the piano, proves what I've always said, is that you don't need that orchestra on the Harvest version, because the song and the piano are powerful enough. So yeah, this certainly proves that point. See the Sky About to Rain, really cool to hear that 3 years before it would be on the beach. But it's already fully formed, so it shows you how long Neil was sitting on tracks and recording tracks before they would actually appear. It's fully formed with the vocal inflections, lovely piano playing, especially the last third where he plays it a bit faster. But it's wonderful to hear it sounding exactly as if he's playing the album version but 3 years earlier. It's quite remarkable. Sugar Mountain, considering it never been on an album, as Neil points out, it gets a great reception. So it shows you at this point Neil's already built up quite the live following, who just go to see Neil Young as opposed to Crosby, Stills, Nash and Young. because Sugar Mountain is treated as if it's this, beloved classic, even though it'd only been on an Italian B-side or something, and it wouldn't be on a kind of wide Neil Young release until Decade in 1976. So it's kind of cool to hear that. But it does say, let's sing this next verse in loving memory of Buffalo Springfield, which gets applause and really gets the crowd going as well. Sugar Mountain, I've never thought it was a real sing-along song, but it turns it into one, which is kind of cool. Don't Let It Bring You Down here is very strained, very urgent. It almost sounds more like something that he would do in a few years in the Ditch era. It's quite intense listen here, and it's always been an intense song anyway, so that's really saying something. Love and Mind from Time Fades Away, again at this point also not recorded, so a new one to the audience. Fits in seamlessly, and kind of interesting that it would be from what people would consider a relatively failed album at the time. Although I always think Time Fades Away is massively underrated, but interesting that it gets maybe even a warmer response than Heart of Gold, so it kind of shows that it's all in the presentation. Harvest comes out to rapturous reception from critics, and it's got Linda Ronstadt, James Taylor, it's got the all-star cast, whereas a perfectly beautiful song like Love and Mind comes out on Time Fades Away and it's ignored and it's too dark and depressing. So it's it's all in the marketing, it's all in the hype, isn't it? If Rolling Stone didn't endorse you back in the days, yeah. Needle and the Damage Done gets an introduction. It's actually quite funny, which you wouldn't imagine, but Neil introduces it as being about a friend that I haven't met yet, and perhaps it's about friends that you've met and never really known, and he ties himself up in words and everybody's laughing, and then you get a song about heroin overdoses. You all know this version because this, January the 30th, 1971, is the version that's on Harvest, because obviously Harvest used a couple of live tracks, so you will know this version. So don't really need to talk about the actual version itself. That's followed by Ohio, which gets instant applause. It's kind of funny to hear that that's already considered like a classic, treated like an oldie, and it'd been out for about 9 months. It's kind of funny how that happens, and I guess it's the nature of music at this point where it just moved so fast. The cycles were music changing monthly, if not weekly. So yeah, Down by the River is on this, but it's not on the other one. It's the only unique track between the two discs. So if Down by the River happens to be a particular favourite of yours, and it may well be because everybody loves that track, maybe this is the one for you. It's a terrific version, desolate murder ballad, of course. Quite similar to the version on Four-Way Street, but just great. Neil's really singing his heart out on the choruses, so yeah, highly recommend that. And then we're going to the encores. Dance, Dance, Dance is the first encore. Neil had recorded that as early as '69 for Everybody Knows This Is Nowhere, kind of about that period, but shelved it, and didn't put it on an album, obviously. We gave it to Crazy Horse, and they were about to release their debut album in '71, literally about 2 weeks after this concert. So you'd think Neil might say, by the way folks, my friend's Crazy Horse, cue applause, they're about to do this song, so this is for them, go and pick up their new album. He doesn't bother. Sorry guys. And then the closing track is I Am a Child, which gets a rapturous applause, being a Buffalo Springfield track. So if Ohio is already been treated as an oldie, you can imagine how old I Am a Child from 3 years earlier would have sounded. It's must have seemed like something from their grandparents' generation. Great version to close it out. And Dance 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 is a really nice upbeat way to segue into it. So those two make a really good encore section. This one, quality release. If you've heard Needle and the Damage Done, that's the kind of quality we're talking about on from Harvest. So although the guitar could be a little bit higher in the mix, especially at the start, quality release, exclusive version of Down by the River that isn't on the other album, and a nice echo in parts that really helps with the ambience of the whole thing. So to contrast, to compare, this is the live at the Los Angeles Music Center Dorothy Chandler Pavilion. I'm looking forward to getting this in vinyl because, as you can see, they've replicated the ring wear on that. And it's got a gatefold too, so when Greedy Hand finally send that, I'm looking forward to seeing that. Just to mention, you don't get anything in here like production notes or anything. You purely get the usual advertisement for Neil Young Archives. So this, it's not just on the bootleg, but it does say on the disc as well. I'm happy that y'all came down, so maybe that is indeed the title. So I'm happy that y'all came down, and I love the cover. It's reminiscent of Gold Rush and Tonight's the Night. So kind of cool to hear, to see that. So this is 2 nights later. So almost exactly the same set list. A couple of things move around and you don't get Down by the River, but I'll just kind of contrast to compare. So on the way home, love the crisp sound straight away, and the guitar's much clearer in the mix, much more up front in the mix. I'd say if you want Neil Young guitar player, angry acoustic guitar player, this is the one you should go for. So if you like the more mellow Neil, go for the other one. If you want the kind of aggressive acoustic, even though it's only 2 nights later, this is the one for you. The audience are recorded well as well. They are loud when they need to be, quiet when they should be, which it's what you always want from a live record, I think. Tell Me Why has a very confident vocal. Neil sings the old enough to repay and young enough to say. He holds that note for ages at the end, which is cool. Old Man, again, he did a funny intro 2 nights earlier, but this is quite a dark intro and much more thoughtful, where he talks about how the old man that works on his ranch has always worked on that ranch, and how it kind of brings Neil down that there's a whole generation of these old guys that we're never going to see again, who are great hands, who work in dying trades that they ain't going to be around much longer, and what stories they'll take with them. So again, there's a much more pensive and thoughtful and dark and brooding atmosphere in this one. The jokes aren't there, but the more deep introductions are, and the playing is heavier and the singing's more aggressive. So I don't know how much of that is the ambience of the room, how much of it is Neil's attitude, maybe what he smoked. Both of these gigs was a little bit different, but who knows. But it's one of the things that helps make them, on the face of it, very identical shows, quite different to each other. Very heavy version of Old Man leads into, again, Journey Through the Past. Wonderful version. I mean, it's just such a lovely song anyway, but it's a nice upfront version with Neil really sounding wistful but forceful about where he's been and his journey through from Canada. It's quite a wonderful version. Cougar on the Sand, once more very moody. There's no introduction to this one. Neil plays off key to kind of confuse people at the start. So again, I think he's having a little bit of fun at the audience's expense, or at least enjoying defying expectations at points in this one, which goes with my theme of it being a bit darker and a bit more, there's something in the mid this evening. Heart of Gold follows that, and Neil says there's going to be a lot of new songs tonight, cue applause, and he says no applause, just save it for the end, give me a big round of applause then, which gets more applause, but it sounds quite serious, so I think he genuinely just wanted to play his music to silence, so I wouldn't be surprised if he was in a bit of an angry mood this day, which again helps the album. It really does, and it gives a totally different vibe from the first one. So Heart of Gold, solid version. He introduces it as his one-man band track, because it's the first tour he would play with the harmonica rack. So quite fun to hear that. A Man Needs a Maid, again, just shows why you do not need an orchestra. It gets an introduction here where Neil says he kept hearing it in his head while he was in his bed with back trouble as well. Well, he says pain, but we all know it was back trouble. He was in traction for a while, and that he didn't understand the track, and he's only beginning to understand it now, which, as we know, is because of the way things were going in his relationship with Carrie Snodgrass at the time. And he sings that a man needs afraid rather than a maid quite a few times during it, which is quite a, I wish he'd kept that for the Harvest version, because it betrays the actual feeling of the song, which I really like. Sugar Mountain, again, the audience respond well to hearing something that they would have known. Neil introduces it as an oldie, and turns it into, in both these versions, like an 8-minute audience participation piece where he talks during it, stops it, starts it. He says, I wrote 126 verses, and this one that I'm about to play I thought was the worst of 126. So and because of that, the audience respond in kind and start laughing at it. Interestingly, on the other show he says it's 129, and when he says this is the worst of the 129, it's a different verse. So again, he's bullshitting his own audience, which Neil's always let to confound people and play with even his biggest fans, so it's kind of cool to hear him doing it even as early as this. Don't Let It Bring You Down follows that. Very similar to the previous version. As I mentioned, that was the moodiest track on the previous one, but here it ties in with everything else, because everything's been quite moody in this, and Neil's voice cracks, for the find someone who's turning. It doesn't hit that note, and it sounds completely imperfect, but that makes this more perfect because it's in keeping with it. This is almost a prelude to the Ditch trilogy, kind of live stuff, where Neil would record, and if he didn't hit a note he didn't care, it would be on the record anyway. So yeah, it's really cool to hear that kind of imperfect perfection as early as this. Love and Mind, again, good version. He doesn't introduce that, funnily enough, for either night. So funny that some songs that he thought would have a future do get intros and some don't. He just rolls them out and sees what happens. Needle and the Damage Done, I mentioned that I got a funny introduction 2 nights earlier. This does not get a funny introduction, which kind of lends credibility to my thesis that this is a much darker show. He explicitly says the song is about heroin overdoses, and says he hopes that somewhere in the universe there's a museum that's filled with all the art that great artists who died of heroin overdoses would have created. So the audience response to that is obviously more downbeat than the audience who thought they were about to hear a fun song when he'd been joking with them in the intro a couple of nights earlier. So again, it all factors into my opinion that this is the much darker of the 2 records, even though days apart, literally 2 days apart. Ohio follows that, and he's really battering the strings on this version. He's pounding. It sounds like he's going to snap the strings. It's much more emotional, and interestingly, it's louder and quieter. And I don't just mean in the mix. Neil himself is playing louder and singing louder, but then bringing it down a lot more and playing quieter for certain parts. So he's telling you when to be angry and where to be mournful, which, wunderbar. So terrific version. It shows he's really mastered how to work the audience and work the song to suit the occasion by this point. See the Sky About to Rain again gets a really good response, and it's a very intimate version, and once more it gets a better response than Heart of Gold. So if you were record exec, if you were in the audience and you were just gauging the crowd reaction, you'd be saying, God, we better make sure it records See the Sky About to Rain. Not that sure about Heart of Gold, that was okay, but it's a bit slight. So shows what audiences know. That's why if you want to break out of your comfort zone, you don't listen to your own audience. But that's also why Heart of Gold played to people that weren't just Neil Young fans, who were casual music fans, and put him in the centre of the roads, and he soon headed for the ditch, to paraphrase his famous quote. So yeah, it's cool to hear that. He switches the encores here, so although it's the same two tracks, he switches the order. So it's I Am a Child first, and he adds on some new words at the start which weren't on it a couple of nights before. Again, it confuses the audience because they think they're in the middle of a new track, but with a familiar melody, and then all of a sudden, I am a child, cue applause. So it's kind of funny that he didn't do that in the other show, but he does it here. Again, confounding the audience, which wasn't doing a couple of nights earlier. I think it's a real interesting experiment to hear two shows so close together. I've got the big Bob Dylan box set of all his shows in 65, 66, and you can do that with that as well. Hear the different attitude from night to night, and I always think it's fascinating. It's not going to be for everyone, but these aren't for everyone. It's a bootleg series, for goodness sake. It's not been sold to casual fans. Dance, Dance, Dance ends it, and it's kind of funny that ends it, because that's obviously a much more upbeat dance, everybody hold down style, which is completely the antithesis of everything you've heard in the show up until that point. So it's kind of funny to leave them on a high when everything in this show has been to bring them down. But yeah, it's as though the audience even respond to it being a darker show, because there isn't the big elation that there isn't the clapping along quite as much as there was 2 nights earlier. So yeah, so overall, this, if you prefer your darker Neil Young, you're more, I don't want to say depressing, but more introverted Neil Young, more confounding Neil Young, this is the one to go for. So if you like Time Fades Away and that kind of stuff, that's the one to go for. But with almost identical songs, if you like slightly easier listening and a more upbeat and happy sound, this is the one to go for. So that's really the difference between those two shows. Personally, as a fan, I think it's great to have both, and I think they are both wonderful in their own ways, and that's the differential. Casuals and slightly happy, people that prefer slightly more upbeat, or people that prefer the much darker and more introverted and kind of confounding expectation. And I think that will appeal more to Neil Young fans, because that's what a lot of us love about Neil is the lack of concession to the fans. He doesn't always give you what you want, he gives you what you need, and then we have the other release, of course, which is Citizen Kane Junior Blues, which again is not a gatefold, but it's recorded at the bottom line. I'll read you very briefly this description. So it was recorded in New York City, May the 16th, my birthday, 1974. It says, where analog tape exists in Neil Young's archives. These concerts have been mixed properly, providing much higher quality than have previously existed. So that's these two that it's talking about there. This is the case for both 1971 shows, so i.e. they're both from existing analog masters and the originals. If no tape exists, the original bootleg has been restored and remastered to make it sound as good as possible. So that's this one. So again, to put it in the context of what was happening in Neil Young world at the time. Neil Young world, there's an amusement park we need. Harvest at this point was in the past, it was over 2 years ago. On the Beach is still 2 months away. And the latest release would have been Time Fades Away, which again probably a good chunk of the audience didn't bother with because the reviews were so bad. But to me, it's that just makes it a more underrated classic at this point. So we start with Pushed Over the End, which is very dreamy, and he introduces it as Citizen Kane Jr. Blues, which fits very much with the idea that it's always been bandied around that it's inspired by Patty Hearst, because William Randolph Hearst obviously inspired Citizen Kane, and she's a descendant, so Citizen Kane Jr. Blues kind of makes sense, doesn't it? Straight away though, it has to be said, talking about the audio, there is a noticeable drop in quality in this one, so it is not as good as the other two. So if you're someone who likes pristine audio, this one is not going to be for you, because it is definitely a step down. It's still good though, but if it was an actual live album it wouldn't be acceptable, but for a bootleg series, and especially a historically interesting one, it's essential and it's fabulous. And the sound may not be great, but believe me, it's still perfectly good. It's all listenable throughout, so yeah, absolutely go for it. Pushed It Over the End, as I say, starts out very dreamlike, and it was played on the Crosby, Stills and Nash tour that summer in '74, the big stadium tour, and then kind of disappeared. But it would be on an Italian B-side, so it had its moment. Recently appeared on Archives Volume 2, so it's had a bit of a renaissance. Long May You Run is the next track, and again that wouldn't be on an album for another 2.5 years until the Still Was Young album. The audience laughs because Neil says he wrote it about his car, and because of that they seem to think it's going to be a novelty tune. So the audience laugh despite Neil taking it perfectly seriously and it not being a funny song. There's a little bit of comedy in it when he does the Beach Boys verse, but it's a heartfelt song, even though it's about a car. As we know now, he's done concept albums and book just about his car. So to Neil, that's a excuse me, that's a love song of just a different sort, really. But yeah, really cool to hear it so early in his career. Greensleeves is up next. Neil Young covers the greatest hits of Henry VIII. The crowd don't really know what to make of it, so it's kind of cool to hear them being baffled. But it's kind of fun at the same time. Good performance, despite it being a very odd pick. Again, it was on Archives Volume 2 version, so we've heard him do it officially now. Then comes my favourite Neil track of all time. I'm not always big on saying this is my favourite X of my favourite album, my favourite film, whatever, but with Neil there is one song that just always blows me away. It's always just my favourite, and that is Ambulance Blues. Just mesmerises me. Despite it being quite a long song, it never feels long to me. It's just perfectly itself. Neil introduces it as here's another bummer for you, cue some laughter as well. It's kind of my trip, and right in the middle of the ditch period, yeah, I suppose it was. But it's really what cemented his reputation as being the great iconoclast of music. And it's a wonderful version. It's very like On the Beach's version, which, as we know, only a couple of months away, so Neil would have known exactly what it sounds like. And it's so similar that I was hearing Rusty Kershaw's fiddle parts in my head You could kind of fill in the fiddle and violin part in your head, which was kind of cool. And this song gets laughter as well, which I wasn't sure about. The part where it comes to the critics, you're all just pissing in the wind. You don't know it, but you are. That gets a laugh, and you wonder. So have you guys been listening for the last 6 or 7 minutes? This is not a laughing, upbeat track. Marijuana, folks, eh? But great version, fantastic. If that's one of your favourites too, get it for that. Believe me, it's worth the price of admission. Revolution Blues is up next, even without Lee Von Helm and Rick Danko on there. Still very heavy. Lets the lyrics breathe, hearing it solo acoustic. And no one's laughing at that, because that comes out the gates as very heavy. There's a real dark sound to it, even solo acoustic. And you can almost hear everybody sitting with their jaws on the floor when it gets to the Laurel Canyon's full of stars. I hate them worse than lepers, and I'll kill them in their cars. So even though we're 5 years after the Manson murders at this point, it's still very much on people's mind. It's a terrific version. On the Beach is again a very faithful version. But it's clear at this point the audio changes, so whoever the bootlegger was maybe changed the tape or moved around from where they were sitting, because you can hear a few bottles being moved around, the glasses clinking and things. It's still good though, it's not bad audio quality, it's just lo-fi, as the kids would call it. Neil invented shoegaze, whatever that means. Somebody shouts out, "Do a country and western song." And Neil responds with, "Okay, here's a country tune for you. This is for you, man," and proceeds to play "Roll Another Number for the Road," which is not a country song, which reminded me very much of Dylan being heckled in the Rolling Thunder review with "Do a protest song," and he says, "Yeah, here's one for you," and does "Oh Sister," the least protest song you can possibly imagine from Dylan. So I like that they're both very, don't tell me what to do. I'm here to perform, you're here to observe. So it's, that would be on Tonight's the Night, so that wouldn't even be on the next album, but the one after that, which is kind of cool. So that wouldn't be out until the next summer. So it was recorded in 73, released in 75, and here we are in 74 listening to performance. It's kind of cool to have something in the middle of those two events here. Motion Pictures, he gives it a nice introduction, says it was just something he tossed off while he was sitting around watching TV with Rusty Kershaw and Ben Keith, and it just kind of came to him. It wasn't a song that he sat down to write, it just, it was literally him just sitting on a notepad and just writing away, and it's great to have, just like it is on the album. It's almost like a little breath of relief, or nothing too heavy while we're really getting to the darker stuff here. And then we move on to the encores, which we have here as Pardon My Heart. So that wouldn't be released on an album till Zuma, so not the next album, not the one after that, but the one after that. And so he's really ahead of himself here. So Zuma wouldn't be out for another 18 months. And it's cool to hear it, because on the album version it's acoustic, but it does have one heavy guitar part over the top, just one electric guitar playing over the top, and backing vocals from the horse. But Neil does the backing vocals himself here, which is pretty cool. You brought it all on. He does those parts himself, which is great to hear. And it's still pretty heavy, despite the fact that he's only there himself. And he introduces it by saying, "It's been great to play for you folks. I've only got time for one more song." And a woman instantly, he says, "I've only got time for one more song, and I'm choosing between two." And a woman instantly shouts out, "Just play both!" And Neil says, "Well, okay, tell you what, I'll do a segue. You won't even notice, it'll be seamless." And that leads into Pardon My Heart. and then it changes his mind anyway. Maybe he couldn't think of the right chord to jump, because he stops, takes the applause in. Why not? You're a travelling minstrel, take your applause. And then he does dance, 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 just like the previous two. So fun to hear that still being used as a, oh well, at least this will send them home in a bit of a better mood. So it's another fun barn stopper. The people who were laughing, they probably enjoyed this one, because Neil says there's quite an interesting smell in the audience that evening, so no wonder they're laughing. The claps come in without any prompting from Neil, so it's kind of great to hear that the audience are just responding purely to what they're hearing at this point. They're in the mood for something a bit more upbeat, which for Neil Young in '74, I don't know what you were expecting that for, but God bless you. And it's kind of great to see that music, even when it's in the context of a very heavy set, when Neil's introduced it as being an incredibly dark, heavy performance, and kind of told everybody this is a bummer, this song's a downer, that hey, you can still end on a barnstormer, and good night, folks. Great to have been here. It's kind of cool. So yeah, so that's this disc. So that is my look, my in-depth look. So nobody can complain if they've done the whole video with me, because we've done all in-depth on all three. So to reiterate, this, if you are a more Laurel Canyon-y Neil fan, this is the one to get. If you like Journey Through the Past, Time Fades Away, the Neil who on the face of it may be just another troubadour from LA, but is actually really dark and angry and thoughtful and pensive, this is the one for you. And this one is for the Neil Young diehard, with rarities and tracks well before they were released, and terrific versions of tracks from one of his best albums, if not his best album, On the Beach. So yeah, I've seen a few people ask, do we really need these? Again, like I said at the start, no, nobody needs anything, but Neil Young fans will need all three, trust me. And slightly more casuals might want to just pick up one of these two and then this, and the most casual of casuals, I'd say just pick up this. But to be honest, if you're that casual, are you really buying something from the Bootleg series? So hopefully that's elucidated. Is it worth getting all three? Is it worth getting one? Is it worth getting two? I think it's worth all three. So there you go. Well, I've wasted nearly 43 minutes of your time already, so I won't take up any more. But so thank you very much for watching. I'm always happy to do Neil Young videos because I like to go in depth with them, as you've probably noticed. If you pick up any, then stick a comment down, tell me which ones you picked up, or tell me which ones you liked, or your opinions on my opinions, or your opinions that you formed yourself. Let me know. Thanks very much as always for watching, folks, and be very careful out there, huh? Love and mercy, my dears. Love and mercy.